This is my next project. It is a formicarium, which is for ant keeping. All I've done is got this quite small fish tank. This is a Ytong block. It's like an aerated concrete. This block's actually been cut in half, and then I've soaked it because apparently it's easier to chisel, which it is. If I just could show you, I expected to be having to use a hammer, but as you can see it's quite chalky. Yeah. I just soaked it for a few hours. I don't know if I soaked it for too long really. I didn't expect it to be so soft. I've done the chambers at like different depths. Some are more shallow than others. That side is like a separate nest that they can either gnaw into through this very small channel here, or they can go up through the entrance. I need to drill holes down, and I'm going to put some sponge into the holes for the humidity to reach the bottom of the nest site on each side. I'll do that. I'm putting a block at either side at the back with a piece of perspex on top, so there'll be just an empty space in this bit. The reason you don't fill it with soil is so that the ants don't make their own nest site into the soil. So I'm just going to put perspex on top and then put soil. I'll probably silicone that down. And I'm going to take this back out and paint all these outer bits. Eventually it'll have card or something over the front because the ants do like to be in the dark, so I'll just put card over that I can take off to view them. Yeah, so they're going to start in this nest chamber, this nest site on this side, and I'll block that hole there until they seem like they need a bigger nest site, and the same with the side bits as well. I will do a bit on the ends as well. I've had to, instead of breaking up a new block, I'm going to piece the sides together, and I'll just use cardboard to just hide the joins and that, I think. I have watched quite a few YouTube videos on how to do this, and people say they've got these to fit flush, but to be honest I'm having trouble because obviously the silicone stops it fitting really flush, especially if you've got a really small species. You don't want them just all the eggs and that falling to the front, so I've done it as tight as I can anyway. Yeah, so all I did, luckily these Ytong blocks were from some builders around the corner. They're building a bungalow or something, and they said they'll have quite a few of these left when I asked, so they've just let me have them. They didn't even want any money for them. So I just marked on the chambers and the pathways, and then I've just been gouging it out with the chisel. I will be keeping one of our native species in it, which is Lasius niger, the common black ant. There's multiple nest sites in my garden during spring and summer. It's still winter yet, so I probably will have to wait. I know there's a red ant nest as well. I can't quite remember the name of those yet, but So I may do another one of these at some point if this goes well, and do a formicarium for the red ants as well. I'm trying the native species first, because obviously if I have any escapees it won't matter to the outside world if they do escape, rather than getting foreign species. And obviously it's a good test to see if my enclosures are escape proof. You know, I think it's a good first beginning point, just for experience, before going on to the more unusual species. Like I said, I've watched quite a lot of YouTube videos. I'm a particular fan of Ants Canada. He's done some brilliant videos. I'm just painting the surfaces. I'm just using black. So I think soil's very dark. I just think it looks better as a contrast. I'm just using this. It was £2 for a great big tube. I've not used all of that. I've already had it in for other projects. I think it was from the works or somewhere like that. It's more than enough. I did drill my holes, and I put a sponge in the bottom and just some airline tube, and I can use a syringe just to squirt water down there, and I have just guessed approximately where the sponge is and drilled a little hole through to where the sponge would be. This hole down here leads to the side chambers. I've just kind of roughly done those so the ants could come through there. And I did the same on the other side. So I'll just carry on with this for a minute. Right, so that's the bottom half complete. I just need to make a hood that is close fitting enough and everything to avoid escapes, with a really close knit metal mesh, I think. I've not worked that out yet. I did have a problem with this side. There was a slight gap between the glass and the end of the block, but what I used was just some aquarium sponge, and just cut the shape of it and just poked it down with a knitting needle. I put a piece of perspex on top. I didn't silicone it down, I just used parcel tape. I know the ants can chew through that, but they can chew through silicone as well, and they'll just find that there's a big void of nothing under there if they do get through, so I'm not really worried about that. I've blocked all the entrances up for now, even the one that they'll be going into, just so that soil didn't fall down. You can see my water pipes sticking up just out of the ground. I just put a tube in so that the ants won't try and use that as a entrance hole. I suppose I could put something in there to block that. And I found a saline eye wash thing in a first aid kit, rather than my syringe that I use for painting, and I could just squeeze water down there. Right, so that's where I'm up to at the minute. Next is the lid, and there's the other side, the other end. I'll just show you around the back. There's the big void underneath. have tried to keep ants before, rather disastrously, because I never knew anything about them. One of my sisters bought me this ant world thing years and years ago. It came with tubes and vermiculite to put in there and what have you. But I thought you could just gather some wild ants, bung them in, and the colony would grow, not knowing anything about them. I didn't realise that you need the queen and things like that, and they just died one by one and would dump in the bodies. It only took about 2 or 3 days for them all to be dead. But this time I've looked up what to do. So I shall find a wild colony and try and capture the queen with some workers. Once the lid's done, of course. Right, I've decided how I'm going to do the lid. What I'm using is some runners rescued off a wardrobe I was taking apart for making a vivarium, but I can't use these runners because of the different widths of the gaps. But I can use it for this. So I've just cut the pieces. I've used a mitre block to do the corners, and they'll fit as closely as possible when it's finished. Right, so I've cut them. As a double precaution, I've put foam tape around the just underneath where that sits. I've cut a piece of perspex to shape and cut another hole in the middle so I can easily see to the ants and whatever. I've got another piece to sit on top of that that's just a little bit bigger than that hole, and that will sit within another surround. All these will be siliconed on, so the lid will sit in an indentation like that. Now some bits are a bit wibbly wobbly. A shoddy workman always blames his tools, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I used a jigsaw to cut it, and it was melting itself back together behind the blade as I was cutting it. But I didn't have a very steady hand, it kept going off. I know these holes are too big, an ant could get through these, but my idea is to use an aluminium drinks can, stab little tiny pinholes in. You can use like gauze mesh, like really fine gauge mesh, but I don't want to go out and buy something else special for this project, being a first project. And so I'm just going to use a drinks can. I'll probably just tape the edges so I'm not going to cut myself on it or something. I don't know, not yet. And that will cover these holes. I'm just going to silicone the aluminium over the top, and I'm going to silicone like a little handle so I can lift this piece out. That's all I can do at the minute because I've no silicone in, so that is one thing I'm going to have to go and buy. What I will be doing as well, that I think some people use, is just on the underside of the lid I'm just going to coat it a bit with baby powder, because apparently it makes it so that the ants can't get a good grip on the surface. I'm hoping it works, just to stop them being able to easily try and find a gap, if you know what I mean. But I'm hoping I've done everything as close fitting as I can. I'm not going to have my silicone too thick wherever I do silicone, because they can chew through that. I'm lucky that the runners were just the right width for the glass, so that's nice and snug as well. The perspex had been salvaged years ago, and it's been used for various different things. Right, for the vents, what I've actually ended up using, because I've not got an empty aluminium drinks can at the minute and I'm impatient to get on with the project, my husband's given me these. They're aluminium, they're used for spraying car wheels. You put loads of these around the rim and you don't spray your tyres basically. But that's what I'm using. What I did was I put it underneath, just marked each hole, and then I've just used a little like tack. Where's it gone? Just used a tiny tack just to make multiple holes around, and what I'll do is I'll silicone that to the underside. Good, and I'll put a good smear of silicone around the edge as well, making sure that I don't put anywhere this sits on the ledge, because I don't want this being raised up at all. It's not very sharp, it's only tiny little pinpricks, as you can see. Right. Well, I've finished. I did have to take the blocks back out because I was having a problem with one of the water tubes, but it's alright now, it's all tested. And I did end up siliconing the piece of perspex that's at this level, that had parcel tape on before. I thought, well, I've got it all out, I've got my silicone now, so I've ended up siliconing that down as well. I'll just show you what I do to apply water. I found my syringe, by the way, out of my stash of paints and stuff. Right, so I just squirt some in. I don't know if it'll show on camera. Oh, I've got it running down the side. It does work though. It's just difficult holding the camera at the same time. So now I just need some ants. We've had a few days that have been like spring lately, but at night it is frosty, but I did see my first ant out and about outside yesterday, so hopefully soon I'll have some to add. Put the decorations back in. I've decided they can have the pound shop snail that I bought. Put that there. I've put them in a dish where I'll put the food and what have you. There are sponges in these water holes at the bottom, so they could get the water from there. I've siliconed the corners a little tiny bit as well, so it's not impossible for them to get out if they should do silicone here and there, but I believe I've made it extremely difficult for them. Watch them prove me wrong. I'll have ants all over my house. Worst comes to the worst, I can just put the tank outside. So there we go.